Hey guys, so today I'm going to walk you through how I make a Linkin Park style track like this. I have done a video before on Linkin Park sound, but it's been a while and I feel like I can do better, so we're redoing it today. So let's jump right in. As always, I'm starting with a bunch of my own presets. You can see we've got metal guitars, bass guitar, bass synths, some effects tracks, some drums, digital drums, metal drums. So I'll walk you through all of those one by one as we build this track from scratch. But first of all, we're going to focus on some hard rock drums. So we're going for 98 beats per minute, nice and bouncy and slow. Let's leave space for an intro, so I'll start here. As usual, I'm using my go-to Get Good Drums. So here's the raw sound. And these three blue tracks are Get Good Drums, so we have the kick, the snare, and the overheads separate, which I'll get into that in a minute. But first, let's just lay something down. I've said this before on the channel, and I don't like to get too formulaic with things because it kind of stifles creativity. But I have to say, if there is a formula for nu metal, it's quite clearly the cymbals and the snares go straight on the beat. You want it bouncy, straightforward on the beat. What actually gives you that bounce is throwing the kick drums way off the beat. You want to displace the rhythm with nothing but the kick drums. So everything else is straightforward but the kicks. So for example, if this was more like industrial metal, we'd move the kick straightforward. But if we want something bouncy, that's where we're going to find it. Nu metal is all about the beat. We know that. It's all about the bounce. But it won't have that bounce if we don't have a couple of kicks in there throwing the beat off, giving us that upbeat. And let's also make a second drum beat with like the same kind of thing, but just move some things around, move the kick pattern around a little bit. Okay, so I'm going to use those as basically our main riff, and then this will be the chorus where it opens up a little more. All right, so now we can take this. This is our first groove, and this is the second one. Now we can separate them out. So I'm going to just solo the kick and turn on these effects, and let's just put this exact same thing on the snare track and overhead track. So to quickly break down what I'm doing with each drum differently, here's what we're doing to the kick drum. So here is how it sounds raw, and here is what I'm turning it into. Way more bassy, way less of that like metalcore slap. As we all know, the drums in early Linkin Park are very, very hip hop. So we want that sub bass. We want it rather than too clicky and slappy. So there's essentially two things I'm doing here. Very, very simple. First of all, we're just hard gating it. So if you listen without the noise gate and with, so that's just cleaning it up so we don't get that tail. It's just all we need is that punch. Then I'm just getting some distortion from Decapitator and also just cutting some of that high-end slap out, almost using Decapitator like a filter. And I'm just using our bass, which is a bass enhancer. That's just giving us more sub bass, more sub frequencies under the kick so that it's super, super low and powerful. All right, now the snare, this isn't going to make that much sense until we get to some stuff later on. So just remember this. So we've got this big echoey, roomy snare sound. Sounds good, but it doesn't sound super Linkin Park, but that will make sense later on. The main thing really going on with the snare is just that I've got a lot of room reverb going on so that there's a big echoey epicness to it. There's still something missing from the snare, but when we get to our digital hip-hop drums and stuff, it will all make sense, so stay with me. And for the cymbals, I'm just trying to get them very bright and energetic, so we've got some compression, Decapitator, boosting the high end with fresh air, so it's really grating and bright. OTT, which is just slamming it really hard with some compression, and just a bit of EQ boosting some highs. And that's all we need for drums. Like Linkin Park's drums are super simple, and I don't mean that as an insult. It's a good thing. Like simple drums, in my opinion, will always hit hardest. So that's our rock drums done. We're not done with drums. I'm going to do the trick that Linkin Park always did on their heavy stuff that somehow everyone isn't doing yet. It's 2024. This should not be a Linkin Park only trick. This should be something everyone does. I've been doing this a lot in the recent videos. We're just going to layer some digital drums over our rock drums and just listen to how this is going to transform the drums. It's going to make them so modern, so powerful without killing the rock vibe. So I'm going to use this pop kit called Candy that I keep using. It's just very sharp, snappy. That's what we need. We can't really have anything with a long tail because there's going to be so much big guitars and bass. Anything that's boom is just going to get lost in the mix. Some hats. So again, we're bringing down the tail. I'm using this envelope shaper, just pulling down the release so that it's not got a long tail. It's just a snappy, quick sound. And again, our bass just giving us more of that sub. So listen without that and with. If you thought the drums sounded cool before, this just completely transforms them and is so necessary for this kind of style. just adds all that power, a bit more of a hip hop feel without killing the rock vibe. And with this, we're just perfectly following, you know, the kick pattern, the snare pattern. It's all perfectly just following exactly what the rock drums are doing. We don't want it to sound like two drummers playing at the same time or a drum machine and a drummer. So the idea is it all just locks in together and sounds like one huge drum sound. So now we're ready for a big guitar riff, and it's actually not going to be too complicated today guitar-wise. We've got a couple of tones working together as usual, so one tone on the left and right, another tone on the left and right. So overall, our tone sounds like this. Now, I love that tone, but if that doesn't sound quite as huge as you were expecting, there is a reason for that. It's because the bass is a bigger part of Linkin Park than you probably think. Like, this is a huge guitar sound for sure, but I'm leaving a lot of space for the low end, which we'll get to soon. But first, the guitar sound. So, two separate tones working together. The first one I've called Metal, L and R. I'm using the Fortin amp that I always use. I'm just going to turn off the tube screamer in front of it and the EQs. So you can hear it's kind of like a crunchy tone, not as high gain as you might think for like a metal sound. I find that in Linkin Park's music, a lot of the heaviness tends to come from like the hands of the guy playing it. Like obviously distortion sounds heavy, but if you use too much distortion, you get to a point where you can't really hear the pick hitting the strings and the guy's hands playing. So I find that compared to most metal bands, Linkin Park really keep the gain down so that they can get that kind of, you know, you can hear. If I play super chill, versus if I play that super heavy, it's like you can hear me coming through the guitar screaming in your face. So that's what they try to do for sure. Like in all their heavier songs, I feel like you can always hear the guy is rocking out while he's playing. Super tight, aggressive playing. Like never sounds like they're just chilling playing the riff. So we're trying to preserve that clarity in what I'm actually playing. And then I'm just boosting it with the tube screamer. You can see the drive is at 0. So I'm just boosting it, getting a little more power without it getting too distorted. And then we're just essentially boosting the highs and cutting some harshness. This is cutting the lows as well. So we're basically going for, like I said, we're leaving space for the bass, going for a very high kind of crunchy heavy tone. The reason that we are focusing so much on the high end in this guitar sound is because that is where this clarity is, where, you know, if I'm playing really aggressively, the high end is where you're going to hear that. The way I'm scratching my pick against the strings, that all comes through. So that's guitar tone number 1. Tone 2, this one that I've called Spank, because it's just more of a spanky, bright tone. This one is essentially taking the idea of what we're doing with the high end in the first tone and just giving it a little bit more. I didn't want to mess up that first tone. It's a super nice, solid metal tone. So we just have a second tone that's essentially the same thing. All I'm doing is turning on the preamp on the tube screamer. A preamp can really help with this kind of thing because just listen how much more of that clarity you get. It's almost like you're in the room with me and you can hear my pick hitting the strings. Not a very Linkin Park sound on its own, but in the mix, it gives us what we need. So we also have a bit of fresh air at the end, just really boosting the highs. So all together, these two tones. And let me just show you it without and then with that extra track so that you hear the extra high end coming from it. It's like it's already nice and aggressive, very metallic, but that extra little bit of high end just gives it more bite in the high end, more aggression from my playing that translates. So yeah, check it out. Do you hear how much more in your face that is? And maybe it sounds a little extreme on its own, but when we've got all the bass and everything going on, we're going to need that extra high end so the guitars really jump out at you and really sound aggressive. So that is basically the early Linkin Park guitar sound. You don't have to use these amps and stuff by any means, but for me, that is the way I get it. I focus on retaining clarity while getting the right level of distortion. So let's lay down a riff now, and once again, we're going to keep it simple, and we're basically just trying to lock in with the drums. The drums kind of carry the whole song in nu metal. So the purpose of the guitar riff is almost just to bring out the bounce that's in the drum beat. So we're in drop C sharp. I'm going to stay towards the bottom of the fretboard. It doesn't have to be interesting. It just has to be heavy, bouncy. So let's go ahead and track something on the left and right. So I'm just double tracking and putting this audio on both tracks. No need to quad track really for this kind of sound. All right, and that second drum beat I programmed in with the more open hi-hats and the different kick pattern. Let's now track a chorus over that part. So we'll go for some bigger chords, get a little more melodic, because we want something here that a singer can work with, so we don't want to be too caveman kind of music. Linkin Park choruses tend to be as simple as possible, like you know, just 4 chords, maybe throw in a couple of Deftones chords, which is a power chord with a 9th. If you don't know theory, just Google it. Like, it's just a power chord and then 2 frets up on the octave. So yeah, we're gonna use a couple of Deftones chords and just power chords and make like a very basic 4-chord chorus. And just adding that little call back to the main riff there at the end, just to kind of tie everything in together. So let's put that on the right as well. I just want to jump in, guys, and say if you're enjoying this video, hit the like, subscribe with notifications on so you don't miss all the videos I've got coming up. If you're a vocalist or an artist and you want to buy this track or any of my tracks, the link is in the description for that. And if you want to work with me one-on-one, you can hit my Instagram or email below and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Thanks so much for watching, guys. Let's get back into it. All right, now let's quickly lay down some bass guitar. And this is another thing where their bass guitar is often more than meets the eye. So not as simple as you probably think it's going to be, but we'll start simple. So these bright yellow tracks are the bass. We have one for the verse and one like main track. Right now we'll do the main one, and it's a very basic tone. Kind of like if you took a Korn tone and just made it less clicky. It's like it's got some of that click, but it's not ridiculous. But it's very mid-scooped, very clear, and just very, very bassy. Seems like a stupid thing to say about a bass tone, but like they're often very mid-rangey. I'm just using the dark glass distortion for a little bit of grit. Most of the sound is coming from this, the Ampeg SVT3. I really like this amp. It's just got a really nice mid-scooped sound, especially if you scoop the mids, which I've done. And then just a little bit of compression. So I'm kind of skipping over the bass tone quickly because it's very, very simple, but that's because there's more to this than bass. So bass tone isn't that important, just something consistent and low and powerful. So let's track that. Just completely following the guitars. The bass does not need to do anything special here. We just need the low end. All right, so the secret sauce for the bass. If you've been watching this channel, you know what's coming right now. Now, this is not something I'm saying they necessarily did on like Hybrid Theory, but listening to Lost, which is like the best example we have of a modern heavy Linkin Park song, because they started it a long time ago, but that's kind of a new track. They finished it with modern production. And I am telling you, there is absolutely no way the bass on that track is just bass guitar. If you actually listen, there is just like a bass synth going really, really loud, really, really powerful, and it cannot be bass guitar. So we're going to layer a bass synth, which is here, huge bass, and I've basically made a sine wave. It's basically a pure frequency with a bit of distortion. I'm just using 2 sine waves, so there's a little bit more flavor, a bit of compression and a bit of distortion, going into Decapitator for more distortion, but you can hear it's not like blown out with distortion, it's just pushed a little bit. And then we have our bass again, so it's just a very, very subby bass sound, and we're just going to put it under the bass guitar for every heavy part of this track. So we'll start off, we're in C sharp, we're going to go nasty, super heavy, so... And then in the chorus, same thing, we'll just... God, that's so heavy. Like when you hear that sound, you probably don't go, oh, Linkin Park. But trust me, you listen to Lost, actually listen to it. It's one of those sounds you feel and don't hear. Like they don't want you to notice it, but they want you to really just feel like, whoa, this is fucking powerful. So now you understand why we left all that space in the low end of the guitars and just let the guitar kind of be a texture on top of it all. Without this bass, it's kind of empty. But now we're filling all that space. All right, so now what I'm gonna do is throw down like a lead guitar. This is something you will immediately recognize as Linkin Park because it's something they did a lot in their heavier track. So quickly, this guitar tone is the exact same thing, the 4-tin with the tube screamer in front of it, the same EQs, but then we're just running it into a delay and we've got this one in the center, so there's no panning. Lead guitars with delay, I'm telling you, that's another secret sauce for the Linkin Park sound. Just listen to this harmony and how it just takes it fully into like the epic. It makes it like Transformer core. Like as soon as you put the high octaves with the delay on, it's like this could be a Transformers soundtrack. That delay just gives you the spaciousness, so it just sounds huge, epic, transformer core, like I said. So we've got a solid chorus laid down. Now it's time for a verse, which it gets pretty interesting here because Linkin Park, like the Architects video, it's kind of like producing a whole other song, producing a Linkin Park style verse. Like compared to the heavy parts, they go crazy with sounds in their verses. So we're going to take it down, focus less on the heavy, more on the emotion, the atmosphere. So first of all, this other drum kit that I keep using at the moment, very electronic, very digital, called Nemesis. So let's lay down a beat, and I'm actually going to really like displace the rhythm here with the hi-hats too. So way more movement there, way less focus on the beat, and that's because it's the verse. So we want to kind of open things up, make it a little more disjointed rhythmically. Not only does that help the verse, but it means when it hits and it's on the beat again, it's going to feel really, really good to the listener to go from kind of all over the place drums back to really solid on the beat drums. Tension and release, one of the great songwriting tricks. So this drum sound is very Linkin Park, very digital already. We're going to make it even more Linkin Park with a heavy, heavy bit crusher. I'm going to absolutely just destroy it, make it really lo-fi, and we're going to take some bass and some mids out of it. So that's going to turn it into this. Linkin Park in their verses love making their drums almost into like a texture, just like a kind of fluttery, distorted kind of digital texture rather than an actual pulse. But we don't want to take all the power away, so what I'm going to do is use that as a texture, and then we're going to use this Cubase kit, really basic like 90s kind of gangster rap kit. So we'll lay down a really sparse drum beat with that. So we kind of get the texture from the first one and a bit more of a hip hop kind of aggressive flavor from the second. And then I have like this clap snare I made that I'm going to use, which is basically just like, it's a bit crushed clap pretty much with a load of reverb on it. And let's once again use this as an opportunity to displace the beat like this. Let's quickly lay down bass for the verse. And again, we're going to go simple. So we have the same bass tone again, but quieter and a little less distortion. So we'll just keep it kind of more chill in the verse. All right, so now we make this Linkin Park, and we're going to start with some piano. Gotta have the emotional piano in the verse. I'm just using the basic grand piano in Cubase, which doesn't sound good. Actually, if you guys know any good piano plugins, let me know, because I should probably get something. But this doesn't need to sound amazing. It just needs to be a nice kind of piano-y texture to give us that emotion. And we just literally have a stereo enhancer and some reverb, and that's it. And we're just going to go straight on the beat. You know, no crazy rhythms. Very rare that the piano does anything other than this in their songs. Especially when we have all that rhythmic displacement in the drums, we want to keep something kind of on the beat, so that's what the piano's going to do. Right, then we have these two guitar tracks. So these two things are going to work together, and they're going to kind of follow the piano but play like a harmony against those notes. So this first one, once again, is just the same distorted tone we had at first, but I'm basically really hard high passing and low passing it. And then once again, just using the delay trick, just ping pong delay, hell of a lot of it. And that's pretty much like a foolproof way to get a Linkin Park kind of sound. And then we just have a very, very basic clean guitar sound. I'm just using SS11X with no distortion on it. Very good plugin for clean sounds and just using a bit of reverb, so nothing special about that, but we're just kind of layering the piano and the two guitar sounds to get that vibe. All right, now last thing, and then we're pretty much done with every sound in this track. So I have the synth sound, which again is very low passed. I guess a little bit inspired by like Numb and, you know, that kind of synth sound. And we're running it into a bit crusher for more of that kind of Y2K lo-fi sound, and a ring modulator kind of acting as a tremolo. Listen without and then with. Kind of gives it that fluttering sound, which to me is very Linkin Park, and I don't know why I went to ring modulator, but I just thought that'll get me the sound. So that's what we've got on there, and we're just going to put some notes down. We'll go for something very simple because everything else is getting quite complicated now. So like I said, you can tell that verse is all about the atmosphere, all about the vibe, and making sure that it's super heavy when it kicks back in. All right, so here is the final mix, guys, and that is pretty much every sound broken down. The only thing that I really skipped over was like this scratching thing. Like I found some free samples online and just kind of chopped them up and put some delay on them. But there's not a lot to say about that. I just kind of looked through a load of samples until I found the right thing and chopped them up and made them into what I wanted. All right, so here's the full track. Thank you guys so much for watching. I had a lot of fun doing this. I love Linkin Park. Hopefully I did them justice. Like, comment, subscribe. Early Linkin Park. Let's go.